What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast,
where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. All right, man. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, look, those of you watching, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to be doing part who knows what at this point, but one of our team breakdowns is Seattle Seahawks this week. So I'm really excited to do this team.
Shout out the Pacific Northwest.
Shout out
Twin
to
Peaks.
Twin Peaks, absolutely.
This isn't even an episode of, this isn't even a breakdown. We're just going to watch Twin Peaks for an hour and listen to music.
That's what you have to do.
And it's going to rain. Yeah, no, it's going to rain.
The newest season.
Right. It is the newest season of Twin Peaks. You might not understand, but at least three of you are going to say that it's genius.
Yes.
So I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I mean
I have my David Lynch haircut. We're lit, baby. We're here.
That looks good, brother.
We've arrived.
It looks good, man. Well, it's interesting because it's kind of a perfect parallel to this team right now. Like, a lot of you guys aren't going to watch this team this season, let's be honest, but three of you are going to say that it's genius. I might be one of those three. I'm starting to feel a certain buzz. I asked you before we did all this, like, obviously this isn't the best team that we've done so far, but is it not the most underrated team pound for pound that we've kind of done so far? And there's just
I think so.
Yeah, there's no talk coming out of, like, I know it's the Northwest and things are a little isolated up there. Like, it's kind of out of the way. So I think sometimes they're a forgotten team, but there's like a lot to be excited about. And this team is very much like on the bubble. And I just don't see them brought up like ever in any, like, no shows are talking about the Seahawks. Like, they're non-talked about. So
yeah, I'm totally with you. I think the problem with the Seahawks is they've become very stale under Pete Carroll. They became very stale.
Right.
And everybody kind of just saw what they were, not last year, but the year before, where they snuck into the playoffs and then they just were a first round exit. And everybody was like, yeah, that kind of checks out, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not sexy. It's not sexy right now. I think that's why.
There you go. I
think that's why. And we're going to touch on some of these things, but before we do, guys, please, like, comment, subscribe, and let's roll the clip. Seahawks, baby, fire it up. So, last season, as we do, we start off with the last season recap. We make our way into this season. It's for me, I kind of want to do a recap of how things have ended, like, era-wise, because this is a huge deal. But touching on last year, I mean, you were 9-8 last season. You barely missed the playoffs. The Rams went on, like, kind of a sun run at the end of the year. That just kind of left you guys behind, right? But it wasn't a bad season. You were 9-8 and 22 that year that you guys made the playoffs, and, like, Geno didn't write back, and there was some excitement in the building. Felt like you were going to possibly build on that next year. You kind of didn't. Felt like you slightly regressed, if anything. And it wasn't a lost season, but it was just kind of a 9-8. Like, you faded away, and nobody, it's like if a tree falls in a forest and nobody is there to hear it. Like, did the Seahawks play football last year? Like, it was just one of those years. It was kind of a forgotten year, but obviously, it's bookended with kind of the first piece of this, team breakdown that we're going to do here, which is, like, after 14 seasons, Pete Carroll is gone. It's not nothing. I felt like it was the right time. You touched on this in the intro, so I'm not going to steal your thunder on that, very cogent statement, and kind of sums it up. I mean, things had, I think, become stale. I think one of the things that I've come across a lot in reading, some Seahawks articles and listening to some beat writers and things, it feels to me like with Pete at the end, it was getting a bit Belichickian, where John Schneider, the GM, who I do think knows what he's doing a little bit, was getting in a lot of tug of wars about draft picks, and Pete was like making the wrong calls with draft picks, and it was kind of getting into this power struggle of, the old Bill Parcells line of like, if I'm going to cook the dinner, I ought to shop for some of the groceries. And I think Bill, Pete really hit like a lucky strike with that Russ trade. Like the fact that they got moved off of Russ and then they were better was like such a dub for Pete. And he looked so good that I think it like bought him another year. And I was thinking about this. I feel like, they've done so many studies on this particular thing, but human beings can't deal with too much change too fast. And I feel like organizationally, after they moved off of Russ, I think everybody kind of felt like we can't also move off of Pete too, like at the same time. It's just too much change for the fan base. It's too much too fast. And he made the most out of that first Russ year departure in 22. Obviously they made the playoff. We talked about it, and we were expecting them to be a dumpster fire, and they were pretty good. But whether it's from the O-line situation or the run defense, both of which we'll touch on in this episode, I think you said it best. It felt stale. It felt stale, and it felt like time. And what's so interesting about Pete Carroll, and I'm going to volley this over to you for a real answer, and I'd love our audience to answer if you guys are so inclined. Like, is Pete Carroll one Marshawn Lynch handoff away from like really being discussed in the pantheon of all-time great coaches?
100%. 100%.
So close.
Just think about it. I mean, if he hands off the ball to Marshawn Lynch, there's not the infamous Malcolm Butler interception on the 2-yard line. You've won 2 Super Bowls. You start having the dynasty talk if you win that Super Bowl, right? That would have been what? Would that have been back to back, or would that have been
and remember,
1 year apart?
and remember who those Super Bowls were against.
Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
That's right.
That's
right.
So
and the college run.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And then you have the run with USC, who's to this day still probably considered the best college team ever, with the exception of maybe the LSU team in 2019. Is there any other team that really stands out to you as far as like
Miami
lore,
Hurricanes, early 2000s, that type of thing?
They're up there, but it's a small group, right? It's a short list of teams that get referred back to, right? I mean, people still talk about how good Reggie Bush was those years and how good he was. So good in college that people forget that he was actually a really good pro for very long, but he just wasn't what everybody thought he was going to be coming into the league, right?
Yes.
That's how good that USC run was, and he was at the head of all of it. And I think 100% that I think we're looking at him as a, I don't know. I mean, I think, who would you compare him to? Like, I mean, he got one Super Bowl.
He'll finish in the class with like John Harbaugh if he doesn't win another one, and like Mike Tomlin,
Sean Payton, Mike Tomlin, 100%.
Assuming those guys don't go on to win another one. But when you look at the body of work and just add in one more play and one more touchdown and beating Tom Brady,
he's at a different table.
He's at that Bill Belichick table. He's not sitting at the head of it, but he's at that Bill Walsh table, that Bill Parcells table, and obviously we're going to pivot off of Pete Carroll because it's not the focus of this episode, but I did want to kind of touch on him because it is 14 years is 14 years, and I don't think we've seen a defense that good since. So hell of a career, and hats off to Pete Carroll, and I wish him the best in his later life. I mean,
facts.
It's been fun watching him coach. It really has.
It has been.
But let's talk about who you brought in, because that is another massively under-discussed offseason topic. And Seahawks fans, let me know in the comments if you guys are feeling how I'm feeling about this, because I'm not a Seahawks fan. I have no connection really to the Pacific Northwest. I got some family up there, but it's not a place I've ever lived. It's not a team I've ever been a fan of, per se. Not anti-Seahawks, obviously. I've never been into the Seahawks. As an outsider, it feels like this team has like really been forgotten, and like the coach isn't being discussed, and I'm just not seeing a lot of information from the mainstream about like where people have this team ranked. But you went and hired Mike MacDonald from Baltimore. He's Baltimore's DC last year, and I was telling you this, and I'm gonna put it on record. I feel like defensively, we are seeing the guy who is what Kyle and Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur were offensively a few years ago, which is to say, we are seeing the real young hotshot pioneer of the future of NFL defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bold claim, but I'm willing to stand on it. I actually think that he's that guy. I really do.
Yeah. No, I think he totally is.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at, and I won't steal your thunder too much here, but when you do look at the systems he's implemented, going back to the Ravens, and then jumping over to Michigan and leading that defense and kind of being the driving force that led that defense past Ohio State, and it was the that hump that they couldn't get over for so long. And then going back to the Ravens, and I mean, we all watched it last year. I mean, the Ravens had the best defense in the league. They were unbelievable, through and through unbelievable. And I wouldn't. If you look at that Baltimore defense, there's not like a ton of crazy names on there, right? Like you had Roquan Smith. He's really good. He's probably the best, honestly. And then you had like Patrick Queen last year, who I think was playing above his pay grade, to be honest. Like I think Mike MacDonald was getting the best out of him.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be shocked if there's a bit of a regression in Pittsburgh this year.
Yes.
And then you have guys like Kyle Hamilton, who are obviously was an All-Pro last year, but he's a second-year player. He's not some crazy seasoned vet. And outside of that, you got a bunch of dudes, just like guys.
Yeah.
There's nobody crazy coming off the edge there. There's nobody crazy on the interior D. But they were an unbelievable defense. I mean, look at what they did to our Lions. Like they whooped them up and down that field for an hour straight.
Completely took our lunch money. And I'm glad that you brought up kind of the diversity here, because I think the first thing when looking at Mike MacDonald and like what he really does, it's a gap scheme over formation scheme. So these players learn the gap scheme and then they plug into all these formations. So these young players aren't learning this, girthy playbook of, dozens and dozens of formations and plays. They're learning their assignments that translate to different formations, which does two things. Mm-hmm. It allows these teams to catch up to speed quickly, these young players, which is why it worked in college at the collegiate level, and why it's going to work, in my opinion, year one in Seattle. It allows them to catch up quickly, but it also confuses offenses during prep, because when you're looking for all of these tells and you're looking for all of these signs with these offenses, you're not able to keep up because, well, they do this formation, they're going to do this. Well, not necessarily. It's just a matter of what that individual player is doing in terms of his actual assignment in that particular gap scheme. So, it makes it really easy to break down. And he's one of those coaches that, for me, what's really cool is that when things cross stream for us, where we get a coach or a player that's come from University of Michigan, because I grew up in Ann Arbor. I bleed maize and blue. I'm a biased Wolverine fan. There's a lot of coordinators that get plucked from college that I might not know everything about, or I might not feel totally secure saying this is my stance on this guy. Right? He worked for Saban. Well, was it this guy or was it Saban? This is a guy that I can truly say saved Michigan football. If there's any Michigan fans watching this, the mainstream narrative on Jim Harbaugh has pivoted greatly in the last few years, since we started beating Ohio State and we won a national championship. And Jim really did build a great culture at Michigan, but we lost Jim's first 5 seasons, we did not beat Ohio State. We didn't make the playoff, and we didn't win the Big Ten. And people totally forget about that because of how good they've been the last 3 years, and particularly last year winning the national championship. But Mike MacDonald completely saved. I mean, Jim had to call John and call in a favor and send up that bad signal. And I would say John gave Jim the favoriest of favors, so to speak, by giving him this dude.
He did.
And you saw, right, within less than one season, within an off season, we had an NFL defense playing on Saturdays. And at one point a couple of years ago, Ohio State had C.J. Stroud at quarterback, Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the slot, and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson on the outside. And they couldn't really cook against us.
No.
That's a real
J.K.
lineup.
Dobbins
that
was the running back, wasn't he?
I think that was before. I think
Or was that
Dobbins was in the
before?
league at that point. But it doesn't really
Okay.
matter, does it? I mean, like when
No,
you
it
think
doesn't.
about that lineup from like a talent perspective, you're like, wow. And we definitely did not have the talent defensively. We had talent, but not on that level to like shut those guys down. But it's because we're watching the birth of something. And the one knock that I'm seeing against, that I'm seeing kind of the media or anybody sort of talking about it is, well, we don't know that he can build a culture. And my only pushback is he learned from two of the best culture builders we have in this game right now. One guy's weird. The other guy seems pretty normal and well-adjusted. Take a little bit of both, put it into a cosmic gumbo, and there's your culture. I think that he can build a culture very quickly based on who he's learned from. And in terms of the scheme, in terms of the design, I think he's there. I understand the hesitancy with hiring a defensive head coach in today's NFL, but they also brought in Ryan Grubb from University of Washington, which I want to pass it over to you to talk about, but I think it's really important that those guys come in together to establish something.
100%. I think it's excuse me. I think it's such a like injection of fresh air into what is objectively a very cool football city. A cool fan base. You got a little annoying with the 12th man thing there for a little bit, but you earned it. You know what I mean? Like it's from what I've heard, like one of the coolest stadium atmospheres ever. And it's a team that's easy to root for. I didn't have any NFC bias against you guys when you were going on your run. It was actually super fun to watch you guys do that because it's kind of like a win for the little guy, right? It's a win for the small market. And if you've watched any of our episodes before, you know that we're like Detroit guys. So we come from those small markets. So watching you guys win, it almost feels like a win for the rest of us, right? So when you go out and you get a guy like MacDonald who, as Ian just said, is kind of this whiz kid. You really, the trend in the NFL right now, as we've talked about many times before with our other videos, is that if you're going to bring in a defensive head coach, you need to pair him with a really smart offensive coordinator, a wizard of such, right? It's very D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slowick. Dan Campbell's not necessarily a defensive guy, but he's a culture builder. And then you pair him with a Ben Johnson. You have a Quinn with Cliff Kingsbury now and over there in Washington. It seems to be a trend that's going in that direction, and it seems to work. More importantly, so you bring in Ryan Grubb from Washington. It's an interesting hire at the very least, right? It's an exciting hire. I can't sit here and say it's a slam dunk because one, Ryan Grubb has never coached anything in the NFL. Normally you'll see guys jump kind of back and forth. Maybe he'll be an O-line coach in the NFL and then work his way up to an offensive coordinator in college and then come back to the NFL. He's never done any of that. He's followed Kalen DeBoer everywhere he went to this point. They started off real small, and they obviously worked their way up to Washington with a brief stint for both of them in Ypsilanti, Michigan. So they're friends of the show. They both coached at Eastern Michigan. So they're good in our books, but it's just one of those things, man. I mean, anybody who watched college football last year knows what a dynamic offense Washington had, and that was Ryan Grubb's system. When I was kind of going over this, when I wanted to articulate what I wanted to say about Grubb in this segment here, I wanted to point out how he's kind of like he ironically is like the Mike MacDonald of offenses, right? Like he's kind of now known for his trickery and his really weird schemes, and it's not your standard stuff, right? So I'm watching this clip that of a play he ran against Michigan State a couple years ago. It was either last year or the year before, and he's running in one personnel, which is four. It's no running back, one tight end, and four receivers. But he's got both receivers lined up in the backfield as if they're running backs almost. One goes into motion, and they pick on this one singular DB because the two out DBs have to follow the posts, right? They have to follow the two wide receivers who are on the sidelines. He's got one who goes into motion. He runs kind of up the middle almost, does a little like scissor route, and it leaves one DB to guard the wide receiver who's in motion and the tight end. So then Michael Penix just waits to see which one the DB takes and throws it right to the other one for a 15-yard gain. And you think, there's no way the defense knew that. Like, what would you expect from that? Why, if I'm looking at this play happening and I'm a linebacker or a defensive back, I'm looking and going, why are there two wide receivers lined up next to the quarterback? Like, what exactly is about to happen right now? And it's just this like trickery stuff. And I think that I'm not sure that any other team needs this as bad as the Seahawks do. And I'll get into this a little later, but when you look at their personnel and when you look at the players that they particularly have, they all have such high ceilings that I feel like none of them have reached yet. I think Kenny Walker can be something outstanding. I think D.K Metcalf can be something outstanding. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba can be something outstanding, but it needs the right puppet master. And I truly believe that Ryan Grubb will be the right puppet master. The jump from college to the NFL is going to be very difficult. So I don't see this as being like a completely flawless, easy transition for him. But I think once this team starts gelling, it's going to be like they're good. This offense is going to be a problem. It's just going to be a problem. It's just kind of what I see. The offensive line lacks a lot. It leaves so much to be desired. So that's going to play a part, especially earlier in the year when they're all trying to gel. But man, if you can get Geno some protection, some of the most fun plays, and you can quote me on this. We can revisit it in 9 months. Some of the most fun plays from this season are going to come out of that offense. I promise you.
Yeah, that's so well said, man. I think, yeah, I mean, again, with the Ryan Grubb stuff, I got nothing but good things to say. But let's kind of talk about the forgotten, on the forgotten quarterback on the forgotten team. Like he's kind of the perfect ethos, I think, for what this team's become, right? Which is like,
yeah,
we've just sort of forgotten. I think a lot of the things I'm seeing around Seattle talk is like, well, they don't have a quarterback, they don't have their guy, they don't have a quarterback, and you certainly, at 34, turning 34 in October, I certainly don't think that Geno Smith is your franchise future, star quarterback. I understand that. But man, he's a really good bridge right now. Like, this guy's not a bum at all. And I think that like has to be noted because, obviously, I was living in New York when Geno Smith was the quarterback for the Jets, and I watched a lot of them those early years, and he was really bad. And then he kind of fell into NFL obscurity, and he became kind of those like those videos on YouTube that's like whatever happened to like and he would be on those and you're like, he's still in the league, like damn. But he really had a rough early career. But look, man, that the 2022 season, I know it gets overly discussed and overly hyped a little bit, but the year where Geno didn't write back, the year that Geno kind of had that comeback, 4,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 picks, and 100 passer rating over that season. That's top 10 quarterback stuff. Like if Aaron Rodgers has that stat line with the Jets this year, I think the Jets might make the Super Bowl. And it's like, again, I mean, last year he finishes with 3,600 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 picks, and a 92 passer rating. There was regression there, but I think the dirty little secret, and it's why I'm so glad that Andy provided me, frankly, and you guys with a lot of information on this offensive coordinator, is I think Shane Waldron has held this team back tremendously. I don't believe in Shane Waldron at all as an OC. And I think he did a really good job working in tandem with Canales in 22 to kind of build a system that worked. And then they just got away from it a little bit last year. I don't think Geno's going to come out and be a world beater, but one thing to me that really sticks out with this offensive coordinator hire and with this quarterback is, isn't there a little Michael Penix to him?
100% there is.
And listen, I know besides the obvious, don't like get in here and be like, oh, he's just saying that. That's not what I mean. I mean the way they play, the way they
Geno
throw the ball. You know what I'm talking about. I already know what people are going to say, like, oh, that's a lazy comp. It's like, I'm not doing the white guy receiver thing, I promise. I mean, the way that they throw the ball, I think Geno's arm talent is really, really good, and it's criminally underrated. And I think with a vertical passing attack and with these weapons, I actually really, truly think that this offense, is going to look a little bit more like 2022 Geno Smith than 2023 Geno Smith. So I don't know, man. I know people are kind of out on him, but I think for a couple of years for the price with this team, I actually think he's going to have a couple of really good years if he can stay healthy. And I'm not out on. I haven't sold my Geno shares all the way. I'm not done yet.
Yeah, fair.
And again, before I pass it over to you with a couple of the pieces, one of the things I like to do with this show is talk about my favorite players and kind of make bold predictions about certain guys. And we did it in episode 1 with Trey McBride, and we've done it over the episodes of kind of guys that we think are maybe still a little bit underrated, that are kind of like, fan favorites of ours, just guys that we really, really mess with. And I think when I look at this team, obviously there's plenty to go around with the weapons and the defense and, the quarterback, who I do think is better than people give him credit for. But the real sleeping giant on this team to me is at running back, and that is friend of the show, Kenneth Walker, the third, if I may be so bold, the third Kenneth Walker, not the first Kenneth, not the second, but the third. I listen. He had 1,000 yards his rookie year, regressed a little bit last year to 900 yards, but when I watch his film and just when I watch him play, forget, me doing film studies for this episode or whatever it is I'm doing, just when I watch the games, there's maybe 3-4 other running backs that can do on an electric level what he can do with the ball in his hands. I mean, there's really just not that many guys. And when you have a guy that good, I think the burden is on you as an offensive coordinator to figure out how to make that guy's skill set really work. And I truly believe that Shane Waldron has failed to do that in Kenny Walker's first 2 years. But I don't believe that it's Walker's fault. The interesting thing is they've been second to last under Shane Waldron in running back targets in the passing game. I think there's room for this guy to be a pass catching running back as well as a just hand it off and go make some magic guy. His jump cuts are amazing. One of the best in football. Kind of reminds me of Le'Veon Bell a little bit almost, how he has those patient jump cuts and then finds the hole and accelerates. The acceleration is elite. He is not by any stretch of the imagination a power back. They brought in Zach Charbonnet to fill that role as a kind of grunt power back, north and south guy. But despite not being a power back, his play strength is like really underrated. Like he's not some flimsy gadget running back. He's a human highlight reel, dude. He makes something out of, at least once or twice a game, and Seahawks fans know this, he makes something magical out of thin air. And, one of the big knocks I see on him all the time is like, well, he doesn't take the layups. He's got bad vision. To me, he's not a DeAndre Swift kind of bad vision guy. When I'm looking at the film of this team and of this running back in particular on these carries, again, man, this offensive line has done him no favors. And I think he's had to overcompensate and get a little creative and crafty with some of the lack of holes and the lack of like run blocking that's gone on this O-line the last couple of years. I think if their new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, can find a way to get more creative with him in the passing game and find a way to scheme block the run block side of this O-line, I think we might be talking about this guy as like, maybe not a top 5, but like dancing in that group, because I know what I see. and I'm just not willing to move off of him as like some like pretty decent, like sometimes exciting, explosive player. I think he's got the makings of a true star running back in this league. He just hasn't been utilized correctly. And if I'm wrong, I'll eat it. But that's my stance going into this year. I think entering year 3, I think we may see that big time leap this year as like a guy we're talking about as maybe being a true stud at the position.
Yeah, I totally agree. That actually just perfectly takes me into my first point, which is DK Metcalf. I mean, I'm sorry, there's not much of a transition there, but geez, I feel the exact same way about him, right? You look at this guy's ability, right? 6'4", 230, lightning speed. Just a brick of a human. And you're like, man, why do I watch the Seahawks and feel like this guy isn't as good as he should be? Like I feel like I watch so many Seahawks games and I just think, God, DK's really good. And he's definitely a number 1 receiver, but like, I feel like he should be a top 5 to like 7 receiver. And he's just not. He's more of like the 12th to 15th. If I may, he's just left a lot to be desired on my end. I don't know if I'm alone in that. And I don't mean to like beat up on him, right? Like DK's still very good. Again, like I'm kind of splitting hairs and mincing situations here. It's like, again, I think you should be like an easy top 10 guy and you're probably a top 15 guy. So it's not like there's this mega jump that needs to happen with him, but I'm really excited. You're going to see this reoccurring thing of like this Ryan Grubb system, I think is going to really, really, really benefit him, right? Because we talked about it. It's like it's taking a lot of shots downfield. DK gets separation better than maybe anybody in the league, right? Like his separation skills are very, very good. And he lacks a lot of that. He lacks a lot of that finesse that like you would get in a Justin Jefferson or a Tyreek, because he's like he's like Mr. America, right? He's like Mr. Universe. He's built in a lab. He looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like, okay, how are you playing football? So he doesn't have that like torque to his body that a lot of these other high-end receivers have, but it's just like he's got the speed, he's got the strength, he's got the catching ability. I can look past, I guess my whole point is I can look past the fact that he doesn't have the finesse or that he's not the best like contested catch guy in the league, right? If you can just do what you do best, which is create separation and go get into the open field and zoom. You know what I mean? Like nobody's tackling you if you're going full fledged. I'll tell you that right now. There's not a single person in the NFL who can tackle you when he's running full speed in open field. There just isn't. So having an OC like Ryan Grubb open up the field for him and find him in spots where he might be able to hit a slant and just go is super fun to just think about, because again, like you're a number 1 receiver in the league, but are you really that guy? You know what I mean? Like I think Justin Jefferson's that guy. I think Tyreek Hill's that guy, and CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamar Chase. Like those are the guys. Be more that than Puka Nacua, if you will.
He's got the it factor to be those guys too.
He's got it.
You can't measure, but it's like we talk about this all the time with number 1. Do you have?
It's there.
Do you have the juice? Do you got that sauce?
He has it.
And he does have it. He's got that thing.
Yes,
he's got
fully.
that thing.
It's the visor. It's the
hair, the earring.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah,
it's
he's got that
picture with posing the picture with AJ Brown, who again is like one of those guys in that same group.
Yeah. And
like you're towering over him. You're making AJ Brown look like a disheveled little kid. It's like, bro, go out there and be that guy. And I do think you can be. I think you can be. I think this is the year. I'm very high on him this year. I think you're going to see the DK Metcalf that we all had hoped to see coming out of Ole Miss and coming into that draft after that unbelievable pro day and combine and people were talking about him going top 5. Then he drops to the second round. He falls right in your guys' lap, and it's not like he's been bad. He's been very, very, very good. I'm talking about the jump from Pro Bowl to All Pro. That's that which I think is there, and I would not be shocked if we see it this year. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you guys feel me on that. Maybe I'm just alone on that, but that's just how I felt watching DK the last couple of years, being like, I want you to be like the best, and I just feel like you're not the best. Go ahead.
No, he's just right there. There's a couple of tweaks that need to be made, but it's also
right there,
it's also scheme. I think there's some things they can do in the scheme that's going to highlight what this guy does really well, which is, the benefit to some of these guys. They've had some good OCs, these receivers that have really highlighted what they do. So he's got to find his, X factor Madden player who can like bring out the X factor with the play calls. And he might have it. He might have it. I'm with you.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the rest of the pieces, to be honest with you. I mean, Tyler Lockett, first year since 2018 that he didn't hit 1,000 yards. I think the first year since 2017 that he didn't even crack 900. 5 touchdowns, 800 yards, 32 this year. I think we can start. Warming up the car if we're Tyler Lockett. I think it's about to be time. I just do, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Tyler Lockett has been a solid money piece for the last 5-6 years, just really, really, really consistent. But last year was the first year I felt like we saw him lose a step, and I don't see him getting that step back this year. Will he still be good for anywhere from 600 to 800 yards, 5 to 7 touchdowns? Absolutely. But outside of that, I don't think there's much more you can expect from him. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a really interesting player, particularly in this system. The overall theme, right, has kind of been like Ryan Grubb. What's Ryan Grubb going to do with these guys? I think that what we saw last year, what we saw him do with Rome Odunze is kind of what we're going to see him do with like D.K Metcalf and more Jaxon Smith-Njigba this year, opposed to Tyler Lockett. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to be looked at as more of the number 2, the Jalen Polk in this offense. And I think we'll see a guy like Rome Odunze struggle with Shane Waldron. I think Shane Waldron's a bad offensive coordinator, frankly. I don't think he gets the most out of his players. And last year, everybody said, JSN was the best coming out of that Ohio State room with like all these, first round draft pick, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, everybody saying, oh yeah, JSN's the best one of all of us. So when you come into Seattle and you're just like, frankly, not very good, I don't buy that it's you. I kind of think that it's scheme. I think it's something that wasn't being unlocked, because there's moments where he showed what type of player he can be and what type of player he was in college. And then there's that like kind of now funny video that's out there in the world where he's asked about Shane Waldron. He's kind of like, yeah, I don't know.
God, isn't that thing awkward to watch?
Oh, it's cringy. So I think
get me out of here.
About the offensive coordinator coming in, Shane Waldron. What can you tell him about who they just hired to try to get this offense where it needs to go?
This is live.
Yeah, we're not live.
I'm playing.
It's terrible, but I think with a coach like Grubb, he's going to get the field again. Same thing with DK. He's going to get the field opened way up for him for a lot of catches for 10, 15 yards, just killing them. And then you're going to have the downfield threat, which Grubb loves to do. He's going to be open for some of those. So I'm expecting a big leap from JSN this year. I'm not going to even really look at last year. I'm going to move on from last year. If he has a year like last year, this year, then we can talk about it next year. But for right now, I'm not selling my stock. I still love buying low on this kid. I think he's going to be great. And yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I'll touch on Noah Fant real fast. I think Noah Fant's sneaky good. I think you guys, if you're Seahawks fans, you know that Noah Fant is sneaky good. They paid him. They brought him back. They gave him money, and he has not really had production really at all to this point. But his snap count is super low, and he only had like 400 yards on like 49 catches last year or something like that. Like, it's not like he's getting the ball all that often. And again, a new offensive coordinator who really knows what he's doing is going to open up the middle of the field for a guy like that. And I think Fant is going to be a sneaky good pick this year if you're a fantasy player. But yeah, I'm super high. I'm super high on him this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I think they traded for him too. A couple of years ago.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the best out of any of these pieces, to be honest with you, and it's a really exciting prospect, man. And it's why I started the video off with the statement I made, which is like, it's not the best by any means, but is it the most underrated team in the league right now?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the most underrated team that I've personally like looked at, right? Like I do, because I just said it, right? I'm going through these pieces. Like I'm high on him. I'm high on him. I think DK could have an All-Pro year. I think JSN's going to make a huge jump. I think Noah Fant's going to be really good. Tyler Lockett, he's going to fall off. It is what it is. You can't be perfect.
No,
Kenny Walker, you're super high on him. Geno, you're definitely good enough to get there. Like it's a good team.
No, I'm with you. Look, we're going to go through the defense a little faster than usual. I think both of us always have a lot of fun like breaking down defensive pieces. But just because we spent so much time kind of talking about, the dawn, if you will, of this defense right now from an identity perspective and kind of the new thing, I think we're going to go through this defense a little bit faster. But it is worth discussing because I feel like Mike coming into this situation is not working with an empty cupboard, so to speak. I do think there are some good pieces on this defense. It's not elite. I'm not willing to go there. I saw, was it Robert Griffin? I know we got to tune out like everything that RG3 says. He might be the worst analyst on television. He's so bad at his job. I don't think there's anybody worse. I mean, and look, it's not a disrespect. Like, he was so good as a player, and I loved watching him at Baylor, but he's so bad as an analyst. And he got on TV and was like, we're going to see a return of the Legion of Boom. It's like, that was a transcendent defense. That's not happening in year one because you've got a defensive head coach. Like, shut up. But it is worth talking about. Look, starting with the front seven, I think I want to kind of go into my favorite piece, which is the unknown piece. And it is in my opinion, one of the great steals of this draft, which was Byron Murphy in the first round. For real, man.
You better say
it is what it is, bro. Like, listen, I'm a little bit biased because, besides Michigan, obviously that's every year, but Texas was kind of my secondary team last year. I was kind of on the Texas bandwagon last year a bit. So I did watch a lot of their play, and he was someone who was talked about a lot as going, as a first round draft pick, because of the offensive obsession that happened in the first round this year, like with the first picks where like Latu was like the first pick at 13 on the defensive side. Byron Murphy fell to a place where in a normal draft, I think he might have gone like 11 or 12 even. I know for a fact, based on what the reports that I've seen, that it all but confirmed that the Rams were aggressively trying to get up and get this guy. The Rams really wanted him. You got him. Nice work. I think this was an example of Mike MacDonald looking at this team and going, we were 31st in run defense in 2023. Yeah. Never again. I refuse to let this happen ever again. And to be honest, like he got the best defensive tackle that you were going to get in this draft, like hands down. There were some other guys that were good, but this guy was a full round ahead of like the majority of the rest of the defensive tackles. And in every draft, there's one guy at a position that's not quarterback, that's not receiver, whether it's like Gibbs in Bijan last year at running back, who just elevates because of, he elevates past positional value. So I was really excited to see him go to this team. I think it's a potentially really big staple piece for the future of this Mike MacDonald defense. And then the couple of pieces that I want to touch on would be Leonard Williams. He's a guy who gave up a second-round pick for last year at the trade deadline. If you want my honest opinion, I think there was a little bit of desperation involved. I'm not sure that he is a star, so to speak, but he definitely is probably your most solid piece on the D-line. He's 30 years old. We know what he is. And he's in that sort of second tier of defensive linemen in the NFL where we go, yeah, he's really, really good, but, right. Where is he playing now? Is he still in New York? And it's like, no, he's on the Seahawks now. Remember they traded? He's like, oh, yeah. But when you watch film and when you watch this team play, he's a really good player. I think if he can repeat what he's done, I think this is going to be, a big piece for this defense. And I think that they're going to need him to potentially be a little more than he's been. Just because I don't think that your front seven is like quite at the elite form it needs to be yet. It's not Baltimore at this point. I think a player that I'm really interested to see more from a question mark perspective is Nwosu. That's a guy who had a really, really good 22 season. A lot of speed, a lot of agility. There's flash, there's explosiveness there, and I'm always looking for that. I mean, you know how I am. I'm a splash play guy. I like that thing. Injuries, getting banged up last year. We didn't really get to see what he is. I'm curious if it's a flop or it's a hit, right? Young player, we just don't quite know yet. I think the major area of concern for me, and I'm not going to even touch on these pieces yet because they're both unknowns within this scheme. Your starting linebackers are brand new guys who kind of feel like they're off the street. You know what I mean? Like, I know they're not bad players.
Yeah.
Like, nobody in the pros stinks, whatever. But like, I think with Mike MacDonald, I think you're relying on some I'll put it like this. I think you're relying on some pieces on the defensive line that are good, not great, to make up for a linebacking group that I think might be like a major concern. You didn't keep Bobby Wagner around. You didn't keep some of these guys in the building. And that's fine. You're resetting, you're retooling. I get it. But I think you might need another draft. I you know what I mean? On the front seven, but it's not a bad unit. It's just a league average, in my opinion. It's right in that ballpark, but you're going to need some help. And that's kind of what I got, man. I mean, it's good, not great, not an area of concern for me, but they got to get major help from Byron Murphy year one to clean up this run defense that has been a disaster the last 2 years, bottom two for the last 2 seasons. So that's it, man. And then I was wondering maybe you could wax poetic a little bit on the secondary before we get out of here, or just talk about somebody,
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really good secondary. I mean, I think all the Seahawks fans know that. You got Devin Witherspoon or Devon. Which one is it? Do you know? Is it Devon Witherspoon or is it Devin Witherspoon?
I've been saying Devon because I just kind of like that better.
I think Devon is that. It's how it's spelled, but I feel like the whole leading up to the draft, and maybe that's just the Midwest in like us. I just kept hearing Devin because I'm fairly certain that the Lions were going to take him at 5 or at 6 if he was there still. Yeah.
Regardless, he's cold.
He's cold. He's like that. No, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a high IQ guy. He was a rookie last year, and he was like that. You know what I mean? Like, I think within this game with Mike MacDonald, it wouldn't shock me if he takes this jump from. I mean, I think right now you can argue that he's a top 10 cornerback in the league, straight up. Right now, he can play slot, he can play the outside. He's elite on run D. He's probably better on run defense than either one of those things. So when you have a player who's so well rounded like that as a rookie, and also has such a high IQ and knows where to be, and just has that type of feel for the game. With now a coach that's like a hungry young genius defensive mind, I mean, I think you could definitely make an argument he'll be like a top 3 cornerback this time next year. I mean, 100%. That's really where you should expect him to be at. Going over the other side, you have Tyreek Woolen, who now I believe goes by Reek Woolen. I think he dropped the beginning of his name as I guess Seahawk name things, or that's a thing now. So the yay of corners, exactly, right? We don't know what any of their corners' names are. So yeah, Reek Woolen's another really solid piece. His rookie year, I feel like he got a lot of media hype for all the interceptions that he got, and then everybody's like last year kind of more down on him because he didn't get as many interceptions. But to be honest, I think he was a better player last year. It's not always about it. I mean, I know interceptions are like gaudy and we love them as just like casual fans who, he got an interception that makes him a good cornerback. Not always. So I think we've seen two different players out of Requel. The first year we saw kind of a ball hawk, and last year we saw a better, well-rounded player. You saw a little bit more of an IQ guy. You saw a little bit more of a player not looking at a position and trying to just go for interceptions. You saw somebody who seemingly understood the position a little bit better and felt more comfortable in his role. So much like Witherspoon, I think that in this system you're going to see a big jump from him as well. And if you do, and MacDonald can get the best out of these two, I think that you can really make a really, really, really solid case for them being a top 5 duo in this league, if not like top 2. They're young. That's the other thing. They're both so young, so they're gonna be ascending together. It's not like you have one guy who's in his 12th season and then you have a rookie. You have two guys who could lock down your secondary for the next decade if you play this right, and they play it right. Michael Jackson, another goofy name. I actually fully put that in the notes. The he that was going to come. He's a quarterback. He's a cornerback 3. He's a rotational guy. He can play the outside decently well when Witherspoon goes in to play the slot. He can hold it down. That's kind of what he's good for. Solid piece. I don't know what you want from me. Going to safety, Julian Love. He's coming off a Pro Bowl season that was a huge controversy because you're not better than Antoine Whitfield. That's just not a thing. But your team has moved on from Jamal Adams now. You're kind of the guy. You have to be the guy. Not that you weren't the guy last year, but now you're like the media guy too. There's no expectation. I feel like there's that thing where you can hide behind this like weird hope that Jamal Adams is going to be really good when he's just never going to be good again. So now you're, front and center, if you will. But again, you had a Pro Bowl year that nobody can take that away from you. They can say it's controversial. Doesn't matter. You had the Pro Bowl year. You're decently good in coverage. He's good in run D. He's a solid little piece. I don't know. And then Rayshon Jenkins, former Jaguar, and that's exactly what he is, a Jag, just a guy. Yeah. I don't know. There's not. It's hard because these pieces that they're going into this different system, right? I mean, I can evaluate them a little bit better if I knew that Pete Carroll was running the defense. I don't. I have Mike MacDonald running the defense now. So everything you knew about these guys last year does not apply this upcoming year.
I feel that majorly, bro. That's how I felt about the front seven. And one thing I do know, just ask Geno Smith, Geno Stone, the other Geno. Who just signed a contract with Cincinnati from Baltimore. One of these guys that we weren't expecting is going to pop next year.
100%.
And we're going to be like, oh, he's nice. And we just don't know which guy it's going to be yet. So I'm with you, man. I thought that was a good breakdown, all things considered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
for sure. Appreciate it.
Let's give it to him straight, Doc. Let's get to the real bottom line. I'll start before we kind of close out here.
Please.
I thought about this a lot, and ultimately I think I have two truths at the same time. I think number one, this is the most underrated team in the NFC. I think at the same time it's the best third place team in the NFC.
Yes.
Not
totally
Chicago,
agree.
not some of these other teams. Might be the best third place team in football, depending on what happens in the AFC North over at the AFC side of things.
Yep.
But I do think you're going to win 10 games this year. I saw 9 wins for the last 2 years. I don't see why there's not a path forward. You were right there. I just think wild card feels like it's possible in an NFC that's got some question marks to me, and there's a lot of teams in the NFC that people are in love with that I'm not even sure I'm in like with and have them as playoff teams. Mm-hmm. I really don't see why we can't see a year where there's 3 NFC West teams. I don't think Los Angeles is dominant. I think they're really good. I don't think they're dominant. I don't think Arizona's quite up to your level yet. I think they're getting there. And I think San Francisco, who's been blowing the barn. San Francisco's been dog walking Seattle for years. And I'm just not sure that they're going to be healthy all season and locked in all season the same way they've been the last couple of years. And I could be wrong, and I might eat those words, but I think there's a path here for 10 games. I'm higher on this team than consensus. I don't think you're good enough yet to be a contender, and it's year one of an entirely new everything. And I don't think it's going to take that long to get good because I think you have pieces. It's not a rebuild per se, but I don't think you're good enough to contend for a Super Bowl right now. And that's where I'll short you. But that's a damn good football team, man. I'm actually going to be watching them pretty closely next year to kind of see how this plays out because I don't think they're a nothing burger like a lot of people do.
No, that's real. That's super real. Hey, man. I'd love that, man. I mess with Seattle. I really do. I didn't have them as high. I had them a third place team. Everything you said about being third place totally applies. Everything you said about the division totally applies. I guess the part where I'll disagree a little bit is I think they're more of an 8-win team. I think they're going to take a step back this year, and I know that's that might be a hot take, but I do have to give leeway to the fact that you have a brand new head coach who's never been a head coach before. You have a brand new offensive coordinator who's never coached in the NFL before, let alone been an OC in the NFL. You have a D line coach who's now your defensive coordinator who comes over from Dallas. Like, it's all new, and I think that you are a prime candidate to be kind of that second half team next year that nobody wants to see. But you're gonna be fighting for like a playoff spot.
I totally agree with that, though. I totally agree with that. Much like Green Bay
was last year.
Detroit the year earlier.
Detroit the year earlier. I do think you'll be a lot like Detroit and just fall a little bit short of the playoffs. I hope you make it. I do hope. I hope you make it for the sake of you guys because I do like your team and I think it's going to be super fun. I just think it's going to take like 6-7 weeks for this team to really gel. I mean, the D line is bad. The O-line is bad. That can't be ignored. And you have a whole new system. Yep. And you have a coach who, again, has never been in the moment, not at least calling the shots. So I think there's going to be some growing pains there. But, man, I think it's up and up and up after this.
So be patient. Let's be fair. It's a guy we like. It's no shade, but it's a quarterback we've seen one elite season from. So there are still some question marks. Fully. And it is what it is. Like, it's no disrespect. You could think somebody's still underrated and, maybe underappreciated and still not think that they're elite, right? I said the same thing about Tua, and everyone came at my neck in the Miami video, but that's just straight where it is, man. We put these guys where we put them, and that's our take. That's our business. But if you're still with us, guys, thank you for watching so much. Please like, comment, subscribe. Share this, do that whole 12th man thing. Like we're really interested in hearing on kind of where Seahawks fans are post Heat, right? Post Pete, right? Your Al Pacino any given Sunday old head coach is like gone. So how are you guys feeling? Are you optimistic or are you anxious? That's the real question. So we'll see you on the next one, brother man.
Peace.
Deuces.